Hi folks, welcome to the channel. It's been, I think, just over a month since I did my last video. Life just gets in the way sometimes, and it's been glorious weather here in Cumbria for the last couple of weeks, so I've been trying to get out, do some walking, try and get some of the old fat off unsuccessfully. But I thought it was about time I did a video. This one I've been planning for ages. Last year I did a video called Blitzin the Inbox, which is an attempt to show a lot of the stuff that had been lying around in my inbox for about a year that I wanted to get shown and get them all filed away. That one I just showed folk related albums. So this one I'm going to show jazz rock, jazz fusion albums that are currently sitting around that I've been listening to over the last year. These, as I say, are probably most of them more than a year old in terms of when they came into the collection. Some are from record fairs, some are probably from Discogs, some were bought new. So I'm not going to try and say too much about any of these because there's quite a lot to show. So let's get on with it. So first up, we have this album by George Duke, The Aura Will Prevail. This was his sixth solo album from 1975. Now, George Duke is best known for his time, I suppose, in Zappa's band. He appeared on some of my favourite Zappa albums, Waka Jawaka, Grand Wazoo, and my favourite Zappa Live album, Roxy and Elsewhere. This is a mainly instrumental jazz fusion album, though it covers a variety of jazz styles. There's sort of jazz funk, there's some Latin style jazz fusion. There's also some R&B soul elements to this, particularly in the two songs that he does. Those are the two tracks I could probably do without, to be fair. Though even on them, the playing is superb. But what do you expect with a band that incorporates, obviously, George himself on a wide range of keyboards? You've got Leon Ndugu, Chancellor on drums, Alfonso Johnson on bass, and Erto Morea on percussion. So with a lineup like that, it's always going to be well played. He does a couple of Zappa tracks. There's Echidna's Arf, and there's also Uncle Remus, which is one he co-wrote with Zappa. This is good fun. Sticking with the Zappa connection, we next have two albums by violinist Jean-Luc Ponty, who was obviously a member of Zappa's band as well, and also played in the Mahavishnu Orchestra. This first album is Aurora, which is from 1976. Features, obviously, Jean-Luc Ponty on violin, Daryl Sturmer on guitars, Patrice Rushen on keyboards, Tom Fowler and other ex-Zappa alumni on bass, and Norman Fearington on drums. This is excellent jazz fusion with progressive elements. Obviously, there's that Zappa influence on here as well. Excellent album. And the second album by Jean-Luc Ponty is one from 6 years later, 1982, and this is Mystical Adventures. And this one takes a step further into the progressive vein of music. This gets quite symphonic in places, particularly the sidelong title track, which is in 5 parts, occupies side 1, which is very symphonic prog in nature. So these will appeal, I think, both to the jazz fusion heads and prog heads. I mentioned that Jean-Luc Ponty played with Mahavishnu Orchestra and obviously its leader, John McLaughlin. So keeping the theme of linking albums, the next one is this album by John Surman and Friends, Where Fortune Smiles, which is on the Tiger Bay reissue label and comes in this mustard, it's called, coloured vinyl. Now this features John McLaughlin on guitar, though hardly in the sort of fashion that you'd expect really with McLaughlin's work. On here, you've got obviously John McLaughlin on guitars, John Surman on reeds, Carl Berger on vibes, Stu Martin on drums, and Dave Holland on bass. This was recorded in 1970 and released in 1971. According to the hype sticker here, it's a jazz fusion LP that sees all 5 musicians experimenting equally with their outstanding musical qualities. This is not an out-and-out fusion album. This is more of a free jazz album, actually. It's not an easy listen. It's quite an ambitious album. So it's sort of a mixture between fusion and free jazz. Carrying on, we next have one of the seminal sort of jazz rock bands from the UK in the late 60s, early 70s, the band If, and this is their second album, Two, from 1970. They were all often compared to the sort of horn rock, jazz rock bands from the States like Blood, Sweat and Tears in Chicago. But to me, they were more progressive than those bands, more in the line of Colosseum, but maybe not quite as progressive as Colosseum. Anyway, they were an excellent band, comprising of two reed players, Dave Quincy and Dick Morrissey, playing saxes and flutes. You've got Jim Richardson on bass. You've got Dennis Elliott on drums. You've got an excellent vocalist, actually, J.W. Hodkinson. And on keyboards, John Mealing, who does an excellent job on this album. A lot of great organ, electric piano playing. And for me, one of the standout members is Terry Smith on guitar. Some excellent guitar playing on here. Highly recommended. I'd recommend most of their albums that I've heard from the early 70s. Mentioning Colosseum, we have Colosseum II. This is John Heisman's obviously follow-up to his original Colosseum band. This Colosseum II were more in that sort of fusion rather than jazz rock with horns style of music. On here, you've got some great players. You've got John Mole on bass guitar, Don Airy on keyboards, and Gary Moore on guitar. Excellent jazz fusion. Let down by, I think there's one track where they do vocals to song, and it's not great. But otherwise, very strong jazz fusion album. Very much in the vein of their other albums. I think they did about 3. Previous one was Electric Savage. This one is War Dance. Sorry, I should have said. Yeah, from 1977. And carrying on with linked albums, we have Barbara Thompson's Jubiaba. Barbara Thompson obviously being, was the wife of Colosseum's leader, John Heisman. and she actually, I think, was part of Colosseum in the later days. This is a 9-piece sort of Latin jazz rock fusion band with people like the great Roy Babington on bass from Soft Machine, Derek Wadsworth on trombone, Peter Lemmer on keyboards, Trevor Tompkins on drums, Henry Lowther on trumpet, Glenn Thompson on percussion, Bill Asage on vibes and percussion, and Ian Hammer on trumpets. As I said, this is very much in a Latin rock, Latin rock, jazz rock fusion vein, with even a sort of, I can hear an element of Afro rock sort of elements in it as well. Next up, we have an album by that superb prog rock drummer Bill Bruford, ex of King Crimson and Yes, and this is his own band, simply named Bruford. In the band at this time were obviously Bill on drums, Jeff Berlin on bass, Dave Stewart on keyboards, and the excellent Alan Holdsworth on guitar, and we have vocals by Annette Peacock. This was from the BBC's series Rock Goes to College, and was recorded in March 1979. And I think it's meant to be their debut gig as a band, and features material from his 2 previous albums, Feels Good to Me and One of a Kind. Excellent fiery fusion all the way through. Brilliant stuff. On that Bruford album was Alan Holdsworth, who I said was a member of Soft Machine for a period. So Soft Machine is the link to the next album, and that's one by Hugh Hopper, Monster Record. Hugh Hopper obviously being the bassist of Soft Machine for a few years. This is an album of 2 parts. Side 1 was recorded in 1973 and is basically Hugh Hopper on his own playing all the instruments, mainly that distinctive fuzz bass that he's famous for. This is a sort of mixture of more experimental sounds with repetitive drones, quite ambient in places. If you have heard and like his 1984 album, you'll probably enjoy that first side. Side 2 is recorded live in Bordeaux, France in 1974 with a band comprising of Hopper on bass, Elton Dean on saxello, Mike Travis on drums, Jean-Pierre Carolfi on keyboards, and Jean-Pierre Viola on bass. This is sort of a more down-to-earth bluesy, jazzy jam with a bit of experimentation in it. Next up is a band that appeared on my YouTube feed for some reason, whatever. I'd never heard of. Tried them out and really enjoyed them. So I went to look to see what was available. And I came across this box set by the band The Pyramids. I can't remember where I got it off, whether it was Juno or Amazon, but it was very cheap. And this comprises the 3 albums they released during their initial period, plus a short live album. The Pyramids were a sort of spiritual Afro jazz band that were formed, I think, initially in France in 1972. In this box set, as I said, you've got their 3 albums. Comes with a nice booklet with the history of the band. Includes their first album, Lalibela. This is from 1973. Covers just 3 tracks. Well, actually 2, as the title track, 22 minutes of it's on side 1, and the concluding 5 minutes is on side 2. And then you've got Indigo, which is a near 17-minute track. All of the music on these albums is, like I say, it's that Afro spiritual jazz. It's there's a lot of African percussion, meditative tone pieces, ritualistic chants, a lot of improvisation. It gets quite free in places. A lot of exotic African instruments. The second album is King of Kings, and this one is, I think, from 1974. Again, 2 long tracks, one at 13.5 minutes, the other at 18. Then you get an 8.5 minute track and a short 3.5 minute track. The third album was Earth Speed Merging from 1976. And the final one, which is a bonus album on this box set is the Pyramids live at KQED in 1975. This is obviously for a radio show. It's only a short album, about less than half an hour. But I really enjoy these because I love that sort of percussion-based, ritualistic style of music. As I said, the band met in 72. I think they finished in 77 originally, but they got back together in 2016. I don't know how much they've done since then. I've not really checked up, but if you like spiritual jazz with an African slant, go for it. Next up, we have the album Herodian Event Number 1 by the unfortunately titled Sphincter Ensemble. This was a supergroup of sorts, in that it featured the musicians Paul Buckmaster on electric cello, who was obviously known for his work with Bowie, 30-Year Band, and many others. Anne Odell on organ. She played with Blue Mink and also worked with Roger Glover. Martin Ford on electric French horn. He was sort of arranger and orchestrator for many artists, including Barclay James Harvest. John Gustafson on electric bass, who was in the excellent prog band Quatermass, and went on to join Roxy Music, I think, at one point, and also Ian Gillan. Yeah, played with Ian Gillan. Tony Walmsley on the electric guitar. He played with Napoli Centrale, a really good Italian jazz prog band. Trevor Moray on drums, who worked with Quantum Jump and the Penguin Cafe Orchestra. And finally, Peter Robinson, who was also a member of, he's the keyboardist, who was also a member of Quatermass and then later joined Brand X. And this was just a get-together of a bunch of these friends in a community centre called the Herodian Club in London on 2nd of January 1974. It's in Barnes, southwest London. And it was just a chance for them to jam out. Luckily, it was recorded. I don't think it was released at the time, but it has come out now on the Trading Places label in 2021. And as you can probably guess, this is highly improvisational, experimental, jazz fusion, touch of rock and opposition style, stylings in places, bit of Zappa I can hear. It's a wonderful album. We now have an album by the Keith Tippett Group. How long this time? Live 1970. Keith Tippett obviously been an acclaimed British jazzer who was briefly a member of King Crimson, provided the superb piano playing on their single Cat Food, and he was responsible for the superb massive project that became Centipede, that band that had like 100 members. Anyway, he did two fusion albums, very much in the Canterbury fusion vein. The first was You Are Here, I Am There in 1969. And in 1971, the second album was Dedicated to You, But You Weren't Listening. In between those two albums, they did two live studio sessions, the first in January 1970 and the second in August 1970. That on the first session, the band was Keith Tippett on piano, Elton Dean on sax, Mark Sharrig on cornet, Nick Evans on trombone, Jeff Klein on bass, and Trevor Tompkins on drums. By August for the second session, Jeff Klein had been replaced by Roy Babington on bass, and Trevor Tompkins had been replaced by Brian Spring on drums. This wasn't released at the time, but has since been released by British Progressive Jazz in 2022. Very much in the vein of those two studio albums, obviously. Excellent Canterbury fusion. The only problem I had with this was the pressing I had that I initially got. I wasn't too happy with it. It didn't sound good. Unfortunately, because it was limited, it was sold out. But then I managed to find a seller on Discogs who had a sealed copy. Going very cheap, actually. I think about 15 quid, which is excellent. So I picked that up. I've still got the original one as well. Need to pass on sometime. The pressing still isn't brilliant, to be fair. It's better than the original, but that I picked up, but it's not great. But then I read that when British Progressive Jazz put this together, they found that the original tapes weren't in great shape, and it required a lot of restoration to bring them up to scratch. So maybe that's partly the problem I'm hearing. Anyway, if you like Canterbury fusion, go for it. After Soft Machine, probably my favourite British uh, jazz fusion band were Nucleus, and this is a reissue of their sixth album, Labyrinth, on the Be With label. This originally came out in 1973. This is a concept piece based on the myth of the Minotaur, though to be honest, listening to it, I wouldn't have taken any of that from the music that's on here. Doesn't sound Greek in nature at all. This is, as it says here, Ian Carr with Nucleus Plus, because it's a expanded band. It was originally a piece that was commissioned and funded by the Arts Council and performed live, and they later went into the studio to record it. On here you've got obviously Ian Carr on trumpet, you've got Kenny Wheeler, trumpets and flugelhorn, you've got Norma Winston on vocals. Now, I don't normally like vocals in my jazz fusion, but she does an excellent job. I mean, it's all mainly sort of wordless vocalizing, except for one track where she sings lyrics, but she does a really good job, like I say. Tony Coe on bass clarinet and tenor sax. Brian Smith on tenor and soprano saxes and flute. Dave McRae on Fender electric piano. Gordon Beck on Hohner electric piano. Roy Babington, again, third time I think we've had him, on bass guitar. Clive Thacker on drums. Tony Levin on drums. No, not that Tony Levin. Trevor Tompkins, again, on percussion. And Paddy Kingsland on VCS3 synthesizer. Seems a bit of a divisive album from Nucleus fans. Some really like it, and it's been called their last great album. Others are not so keen. I enjoyed this. Probably not as much as their earlier stuff, to be fair. But it's very atmospheric, melancholy, dark, and quite eerie in places. Well worth having. And speaking of the great Soft Machine, we have this double album, Soft Machine Facelift France and Holland. This captures them live in 1970, the first three sides being from March the 2nd, 1970 at the Théâtre de la Musique, Paris, France. And side D is from January the 17th, a bit earlier, 1970, from the Concert Gebouw in Amsterdam, Netherlands. This was therefore after the first two albums, but before their magnum opus third. So you've got that transformation from that sort of early sort of psychedelia of the first couple of albums to this sort of cutting edge jazz fusion. masterpiece. That was third. It captures them at the time when they were a quintet, which was a short-lived lineup that only lasted from January through to March in 1970, with a dual saxophone pairing of Elton Dean and Lynn Dobson, who are brilliant on here. But the star for me is the sadly lost Mike Ratledge on the keyboards. He just passed away earlier this year. He, for me, was always the heart of Soft Machine. His keyboard playing was what made them special, really, to my mind. So this is indispensable, I think, for any Soft Machine fan. Oh, and I nearly forgot. The French gig was recorded for the French TV program Pop 2, and you get that on a separate DVD with the album. As said, indispensable, not just for soft fans, for music fans. Now, from one of my favourite bands, Soft Machine, we're going to finish off with another massive favourite, The Grateful Dead. Well, not quite. It's Dead Jazz. This is a new sort of collective project from France, led by the Belmondo brothers, Lionel and Stéphane Belmondo, who on this album cover songs by the Grateful Dead, and they do it brilliantly. With a lineup of saxophone, trumpet, 2 keyboard players, contrabass and drums. They do tracks like China Cat Sunflower, Stellar Blue, Dark Star, St. Stephen Into the 11, Fire on the Mountain, Blues for Allah, Bird Song, and end up with Rosemary. This is excellent. If you like the Dead and you like jazz, get it. This only came out last year. It's not the first time that Dead have been covered in a jazz fashion. David Murray, the saxophonist, did an album called Dark Star a few years back, which I've got a CD promo of somewhere. But my favourite was Joe Gallant's Illuminati. He did 3 or 4 albums of Dead covers, including a couple of live albums, I think. Big band, avant-garde jazz, superb stuff. But this, well worth having. Love this album. I hope they do another one. Anyway, that's it for now. Hopefully, I'm not going to leave it another month to do another video. Thanks for sticking with what has turned out to be another long video here. Take care, everybody. Hope to see you soon. Bye.